Hello and welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute-a-day podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse, recorded here in the dining room of the Bible Bistro, located in Sharonville, Ohio. Hey there friends, welcome back to Daily Dose Radio, here in the Bible Bistro. Here in the Bible Bistro, we are looking this week at Psalm 27. Psalm 27 is 14 verses long. So we're going to look at the entire psalm this week. We're going to take some big bites, really, because these verses are rather long. As you look at them, most of them are quatrains, 4 lines each, and a little bit longer than what we've had. David is the author of this psalm. It's of David. I really don't know when this psalm was written. A lot of people believe, a lot of commentators, ancient commentators think that perhaps this was written before he was anointed king of Israel. So he's still on the run. He talks about his enemy in here and what they design on his life and so forth. So we'll find out about that. This psalm comes in 2 parts. We have verses 1 through 6, composing part 1, verses 7 through 14, composing part 2. These 2 parts are very different from one another. We'll see that as we go through. The first half is very confident. It's highlighted by a confident confession at the end in verses 5 and 6. It begins with a confident statement of fact about the Lord. There are 2 requests in the first half and a hypothetical in the first half. And then in the second half, in part 2, beginning in verse 7, it's a little more dark. It's almost desperate. So it's almost like we go from the confident light of faith to a dark moment, the valley of the shadow of death, basically, for the psalmist David. This thing that really piques my interest when I study and I teach this psalm is how much like Psalm 23 the first half is. Now, it's not exactly like Psalm 23, but the shadow of Psalm 23 is here because we get some of the same kinds of things here in 27 that we found in 23. We have a confident statement of fact about who the Lord is. We have a confident statement of fact about what the Lord does when I'm in the valley of the shadow of death. A confident statement of fact about what's going to happen at the end of life, and what the Lord does to demonstrate his love for the believer before watching world. So all of those things are here in Psalm 27, just like they're in Psalm 23, and I'll refer to Psalm 23 as we go through this particular psalm. Now I'm going to read today verses 1 through 3, and this is my own translation. So if you have your Bible, why don't you open it up and you can read from your translation there, and then I'll read you mine and we'll make notes together, okay? So today, verses 1 through 3. The Lord is my light and salvation. Of whom shall I be afraid? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be in dread? Keep me from the wicked, those who eat my flesh. They are my enemies, and they will stumble and fall. If a host should pitch against me, my heart will not be afraid. If a war should arise against me, in this I will trust. All right, so that's verses 1, 2, and 3 here in Psalm 27. All right, so let's go back to verse 1. The Lord is my light and salvation. Of whom shall I be afraid? The Lord is the strength of my life. Of whom shall I be in dread? Notice that we have 3 statements about the Lord. Factual statements. The Lord is. He is my light. That's number 1. He is my salvation. That's number 2. And he is the strength of my life. That's number 3. You remember in Psalm 23 how David started that psalm off. The Lord is my shepherd. And Psalm 23 is the psalm for the sheep. This psalm, I've entitled it the Warrior's Psalm because of what he says elsewhere in the psalm, but he starts off the very same way. The Lord is light, salvation, strength. Of who shall I be afraid? Of who shall I be in dread? Why? Because the Lord takes up my case. We have a request there in verse 2. Keep me from the wicked, those who eat my flesh, they are my enemies, they shall stumble and fall. You see how the warrior theme is beginning to show itself here. If a host should pitch against me, my heart will not be afraid. If a war should arise against me, in this I will trust. Okay, so he just said there in verse 1, of whom shall I be afraid? Of whom shall I be in dread? If, here's our hypothetical, if a host and if war should arise. So the hypothetical is this: if this were to happen, well, here's how I'm going to respond. And then we have that very wonderful phrase right there at the end of verse 3. In this I will trust. In what? The Lord is my light. The Lord is my salvation. The Lord is the strength of my life. Join me again. Tomorrow we'll look at verses 4, 5, and 6 here on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. For more fresh and delicious Bible studies, podcasts, books, and more, check out the Bible Bistro online and on YouTube. Join me again next time for Daily Dose Radio.